She didn't just succeed. She came back and bought the place that said she never would. Alex Eala just dropped $10 million to purchase the childhood tennis club that once looked an 8-year-old Filipino girl in the eye and told her she didn't belong. And now that same facility bears her name, transformed by the very champion they refused to believe in. This isn't a real estate story. This is poetic justice delivered with a check, and it cuts deep enough to make you question everything you thought you knew about rejection, redemption, and the wounds that success simply cannot heal. Manila Verde Tennis Club was the crown jewel of Philippine tennis: pristine clay courts, world-class equipment, coaches who had trained national champions, and an unspoken but ironclad requirement that members fit a very specific image of what a future tennis star was supposed to look like. When young Alex walked through those gates, clutching a racket slightly too big for her small frame, her mother gripping her hand after saving for months just to afford the trial fee, she had no idea the decision had already been made before she hit a single ball. What happened on that evaluation court was nothing short of extraordinary. Alex chased down balls that should have been winners, fired shots deep and consistent, and burned with competitive fire that even a meaningless practice exchange couldn't hide. She was that good. And yet, when her mother approached the head coach afterward, hoping to enroll her daughter in the junior development program, she was met with the kind of polite cruelty that gatekeepers spend years perfecting. "She's enthusiastic," the coach said carefully, "but international tennis requires resources we're not equipped to provide for every talented youngster. Perhaps she'd be better suited for programs more aligned with her current level of development." Translation: she was too poor, too ordinary, too much from the wrong side of the courts. Alex's mother negotiated, pleaded, offered to pay full fees despite the financial strain, suggested off-peak court times, practically begged for one fair chance. The coach didn't budge. Manila Verde maintained standards. And standing nearby, young enough that the full weight of those words hadn't yet crushed her, but old enough to understand she was being dismissed, Alex watched other kids her age laughing and rallying on the best courts, their parents casually chatting with coaches who smiled and encouraged and invested in players who had never once had to prove they deserved to be in the room. That injustice planted something deep in her that day, not bitterness, but a white-hot, unshakable determination to prove every single one of those doubters catastrophically wrong. Years later, Alex would say that rejection, not her Grand Slam junior title, not her professional victories, was the defining moment of her entire career. That wound never healed. It evolved into fuel for every training session, every brutal match, every moment she wanted to quit and didn't, because quitting would have meant letting them be right about her. What came next is the part nobody at Manila Verde could have predicted. Forced to look elsewhere, Alex's family discovered the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca, a place built on the radical philosophy that champions come from everywhere, if only given the chance. They offered scholarships to exceptional prospects who couldn't afford the fees, and Alex's application spoke for itself. Tournament results that no bank balance could buy. The scholarship changed everything. She trained on world-class courts alongside players from dozens of countries, with coaches who had developed Grand Slam champions, in a culture that measured you by your work ethic and hunger, not your pedigree. Nobody cared that Alex came from a country without tennis infrastructure. They cared whether she'd do the reps, absorb the corrections, and compete with the kind of relentless hunger that separates champions from talented players who never quite reach what they could have been. She thrived immediately. Her game, built on pure grit and cracked public courts with sagging nets, responded to elite instruction like dry ground finally absorbing rain. Her forehand gained variety and consistency. Her serve developed pace and precision. Her movement became sharper, more economical, covering court with an intelligence that couldn't be taught, only unlocked. But the most significant transformation wasn't technical, it was psychological. For the first time in her life, Alex trained somewhere that celebrated her talent instead of questioning it, where coaches invested in her because they recognized ability, full stop, no asterisks about where she came from. The results were swift and undeniable. Junior titles across Europe, a rising WTA ranking, sponsorship interest, professional agents calling. Then came the 2022 US Juniors Championship, where Alex, quietly seated and barely on the radar of analysts, focused on players from traditional tennis powerhouses, dismantled the draw with a combination of technical precision and mental toughness forged through years of overcoming barriers that most of her opponents had never even seen. The final was straight sets. Dominant, authoritative, a statement. She fell to the court when the last ball landed, becoming the first Filipino player in history to win a Grand Slam title at any level. Back in the Philippines, in a country where tennis had long been a sport of the economic elite, Alex's victory tore that narrative apart and handed it to every kid who'd ever been told their background disqualified them from greatness. And Manila Verde Tennis Club? They posted a congratulations on social media. The same coaches who had rejected her now publicly claimed pride in her Filipino heritage, conveniently omitting that they had once been the wall standing between her and her potential. Alex saw those posts. She didn't respond. But the people closest to her noticed she screenshot every single one. She was saving receipts. Then came the phone call that changed everything again. Alex was in Madrid preparing for a clay court tournament when her business manager reached her with unusual urgency. Manila Verde was collapsing years of financial mismanagement, declining membership as newer facilities opened nearby, and ambitious expansions that had saddled the club with debt it couldn't outrun. The ownership group was quietly seeking a buyer, desperate to avoid the public humiliation of a bankruptcy that would unravel the social identities of every family whose prestige had been tied to that membership. And through back channels, they had approached Alex's team, framing it as a real estate investment opportunity, a chance to own premium property in one of Manila's most desirable neighborhoods, carefully not mentioning that this was the same facility that had once turned her away at the gate. Alex listened in silence. Her manager couldn't see her face over the phone, couldn't watch the memories flooding back standing outside those gates as a child, watching through the fence as other kids played on courts she'd never reach, hearing in measured, polite language that she simply was not enough. The irony was almost too on the nose. The institution that had rejected her for lacking pedigree was now desperately begging for her money to survive. Her first instinct was a hard no. Why would she bail out the very people who dismissed her potential? Who had built a system designed to exclude kids like her? Let Manila Verde collapse under the weight of its own elitism, let the consequences come. She owed them nothing, less than nothing, given that their rejection could have ended her career entirely if her family hadn't been resourceful enough to find another way. But as the days passed and she talked it through with her parents and advisors, a different question began to take shape. What if this wasn't about rescuing the people who had rejected her, but about demolishing what they had built and replacing it with something that would ensure no future version of Alex Eala ever had to fight those same battles? The decision crystallized during a conversation with her younger cousin, a talented junior player training on crumbling public courts because her family couldn't afford a club membership. Alex heard herself in that story so clearly it almost hurt. Talent constrained by circumstance, not by ability. She called her manager back. Make the offer, negotiate the purchase, but with one condition that was absolutely non-negotiable. The name Manila Verde Tennis Club would cease to exist. The press conference was held at the club itself, a location choice that was deliberate and unmistakable in its symbolism. Alex Eala would announce the purchase standing on the very courts she had been denied as a child. Cameras packed the main pavilion. Filipino sports journalists, international tennis media, business reporters covering the real estate angle, all of them crowded in alongside current Manila Verde members, whose expressions ranged from curious to visibly uncomfortable as the reality settled. The girl they had excluded now controlled their social sanctuary. Alex's statement was measured but precise, and anyone listening closely could hear the emotion threading through certain phrases, the places where past hurt met present purpose. When I was 8 years old, I stood outside these gates dreaming of training here, she said. I was told this facility wasn't for players like me. That rejection changed my life. It taught me that talent isn't always enough. That opportunity often depends on who you know and where you come from, rather than how hard you work or how much potential you have. The room went quiet. Former club administrators shifted in their seats. Then she delivered the rest. The facility would be renamed the Alex Eala Tennis Academy, dedicated to identifying and supporting talented Filipino players regardless of economic background, family connections, or zip code. Full scholarships for players with exceptional ability and commitment. Elite coaching, equipment, and tournament travel funding for kids currently training on public courts with hand-me-down rackets. A board of advisors drawn from the Rafa Nadal Academy's coaching staff, Filipino sports officials, and youth development experts, every one of them committed to evaluating talent on merit alone. Beyond the $10 million purchase, she pledged millions more for facility upgrades, scholarships, and operations. Then, as cameras rolled, workers removed the old Manila Verde signage, and Alex herself pulled back the covering on the new sign. Alex Eala Tennis Academy, bold above the entrance. Some people applauded, others sat in stunned silence, trying to process the magnitude of what they had just witnessed. The internet, predictably, split in half. Filipino tennis fans celebrated the purchase as long overdue vindication, proof that talent wins eventually, no matter the obstacles. Youth sports advocates praised the scholarship model as exactly the kind of disruption tennis needed. Inspirational accounts shared her story everywhere, but critics pushed back hard, arguing the move was performative revenge dressed up as philanthropy, that naming the academy after herself revealed ego over altruism, that Alex had purchased Manila Verde not to build something meaningful, but to settle a score on the biggest stage available to her. Former club coaches faced uncomfortable media attention. The head coach, who had rejected Alex, was tracked down by journalists and offered carefully worded statements about limited resources and difficult choices, never directly acknowledging that he had dismissed a future Grand Slam champion for reasons that had nothing to do with tennis. His discomfort was obvious. What do you say when your professional judgment is proven catastrophically wrong on a global stage? Sports psychologists entered the debate, some arguing the purchase represented healthy, transformative closure trauma converted into productive change that would benefit generations of players. Others questioned whether Alex had truly healed at all, suggesting that spending $10 million to reclaim a space that rejected you might signal that the wound was still very much open, that no trophy, no ranking, no renamed facility can fully erase the pain of being told you don't belong. A viral essay titled, "Can You Buy Forgiveness?" exploded across the internet, generating thousands of comments from people who had never held a tennis racket but recognized something deeply personal in Alex's story. Because rejection, it turns out, is a language everyone speaks. Alex herself stayed largely quiet amid the storm, letting her actions speak instead of defending her motivations to an audience determined to assign meaning to them. She posted updates on construction progress, scholarship applications, coaching hires, and declined every interview request that tried to pull her back into the emotional dimensions of the purchase. She had already said what she needed to say, standing in front of those cameras, on those courts, in that building that had once told her to go find somewhere more her speed. Then, as construction progressed and the academy's first scholarship recipients were selected, something unexpected began to happen.